If you ever hear a knock from inside the strongest stone wall in the world, don't fear what's trying to get out. Fear whatever is forcing it to beg to stay hidden inside. My name is Sorian Valez. For 12 years, I held the heaviest set of keys in Vatican City. Any tourist map will point you toward the Sistine Chapel, the crypts where popes rest, or the ancient Roman necropolis unearthed last century beneath the soil. But no floor plan, not even the decrypted archives shown to top cardinals, dares to draw the 14th stone staircase winding beneath the foundations of the Holy See. Down there, electric lights do not work. Phones die within 3 seconds. Camera batteries leak liquid. Standard filament bulbs shatter into tiny shards within minutes. The only thing that burns at this depth is kerosene mixed with consecrated oil, casting a dim, flickering, sickly yellow glow like the eye of a drowning man. At the end of that ice-cold, sweating stone corridor stands a heavy door made of black oak bound in hand-forged 17th century iron. Etched deep into the metal are prayers in Latin, Aramaic, and a third script no living scholar can confidently decipher. Behind that door lies Vault Cell 13. And inside Vault Cell 13 is something that has called itself Azrael since before I was born. The morning I took the post at 26, wearing the colorful Swiss Guard uniform I once proudly swore would protect the Pope with my life, Cardinal Severn Dust, a tall, gaunt man with one clouded eye like a dead fish, handed me a heavy ring of 9 iron keys. Sorian, his voice rasped like rotting wood splitting apart. This post does not exist on paper. If anyone asks, your only answer is, I don't know. And if you need a reason before agreeing to stand guard here, then you are precisely the kind of man who should never hold these keys. I nodded. I believed back then, with the naive certainty of a young man who had never seen real blood, that evil could always be contained as long as a disciplined soldier stood at the door and refused to open it. I had no idea that 12 years later, that very belief would crumble into ash. Azrael had no chains. He didn't roar, drool, or sport horns and crimson eyes like medieval paintings depict demons. Through the small barred window set into the black oak door, my first night revealed a man, or the shape of one, clad in plain, dark clothing, sitting calmly with hands folded in his lap as if awaiting a train that was slightly running late. Good evening, Warden. His voice sounded deep, warm, and smooth as velvet. You favor your left knee tonight. The stone stairs, I imagine. That set the tone for 12 years. Azrael never lied outright. That was the most unsettling thing about him. He misdirected, omitted, and framed absolute truths in ways that let you draw your own horrific conclusions, watching you draw them with a look that almost resembled sympathy. Check his words later, and they were always airtight. Every night for 12 years. After polite small talk about the orange trees in the Vatican gardens above or the fountain running near the gates, Azrael would stop, look through the bars, and ask with polite formality, Sorian, will you let me out tonight? And every night, I gave the same script, no. He would offer a faint, strangely gentle smile and nod, I understand, until tomorrow night. Then, it felt like a ritual, a quiet rhythm between jailer and captive, until a rain-drenched night in my 12th year. The air beneath the vault felt suffocatingly dense, making the kerosene flame violently flicker with the stench of scorched skin. Azrael wasn't sitting on his stone bench. He stood pressed right against the bars, close enough that I could see the faint bluish veins beneath his pale skin. He didn't ask to be released. He just stared at me, an expression stripped of all past mockery or polite performance. It was the look of a drowning man who had finally let go of a rotting piece of driftwood, staring at his sole companion. Sorian, he whispered. His voice was no longer velvet, but raspy and strained under an immense weight pressing down on the stone walls. You think I'm what's trapped in here? I tightened my grip on my halberd, cold sweat pooling down my spine. Azrael leaned closer, his eyes reflecting the dancing yellow flame of my lamp, driving each word into my eardrums like icy needles. I'm the only thing hiding from what's outside. Never trust a demon when it offers you genuine sympathy. It isn't lying to you. It just realized you both share the exact same death sentence. Azrael's words hit me like a blast of sub-zero air. What was outside? I wanted to dismiss it as another psychological trick refined over 3 centuries to lure me into unlocking the door. But his eyes that night, void of pride or malice, shattered my defenses. What game are you playing, Azrael? My voice came out hoarse in the damp, heavy air. He didn't answer right away. He stepped backward, merging half his body into the suffocating shadows of Vault Cell 13. The game ended long ago. Warden, he whispered, you think you've guarded me for 12 years because you're a disciplined soldier? No, you stayed down here longer than any warden before you, because you carry a scar that never healed. I froze, pressing my back against the damp stone wall. He was right. During my 6th year at this post, my father passed away slowly in my hometown from bone cancer. There was no leave granted for this assignment. You do not ask for bereavement leave when standing between humanity and an ancient horror. I spent weeks in absolute silence, never telling Cardinal Dust, never telling Brother Malva, the vault engineer, and certainly never sharing my grief with a prisoner. Yet one night, as I sat alone in the dim corridor, clenching my jaw until my lips bled to suppress tears, Azrael had walked to the window. He didn't mock. He didn't ask for freedom. He stood quietly, watching me through the iron bars before speaking softly. The man you were grieving, was he a good father, Sorian? I had snapped, glaring at him. What do you know about it? I know the shape of grief, he answered, his eyes filled with a quiet, timeless sorrow. When a man is merely tired, his shoulders droop, but when he carries loss, his stance tilts to one side, as if bearing an invisible coffin. I've watched 12 generations of wardens pass this door. Sorian, I've learned to read the fractures in human souls. That night, the demon sat in silence with me for 6 hours. No temptation, no sermons, just allowing the quiet darkness to share the weight. It was the only genuine comfort I received during my father's passing. And that was what truly terrified me. Back in the rain-drenched corridor of my 12th year, Azrael drew me out of my memories. I gave you 300 years to fear me, he said softly, but fear of a demon is the cheapest emotion humans ever invented. You think we are the pinnacle of absolute malice? No, we are merely rebellious children playing with fire in the house of the Almighty. But what is crawling toward us now? He paused, his shoulders twitched, an involuntary physical reaction of a creature facing its natural apex predator. That is the cold dark before the first flame was ever struck. What are you talking about? I stepped closer to the barred window, gripping the iron bars. The cold metallic sensation seeped straight into my bones. But this wasn't the temperature of iron. It was the chill of pure non-existence. Azrael pressed his face against the bars. His eyes, which always carried a faint demonic spark, were now completely milky and dull, as if the light inside him had been snuffed out by an invisible hand. Look at the corrosion on this frame, Sorian, he whispered, his breath carrying no warmth at all. You've stood here for 12 years. Have you ever wondered why the reinforced iron bands and heavy deadbolts are fitted onto the corridor side of the door, instead of inside my cell? I stopped dead in my tracks. The cluster of 9 iron keys on my belt began to vibrate violently, clinking against each other. Clink, 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 echoing down the dark tunnel. It wasn't built to keep me in. Azrael let out the bitterest smile I had ever seen. It was designed to stop what's in the hallway from breaking in here. If you see rust creeping backward from the outside of a locked door, don't replace the lock. Pray that whatever is knocking outside hasn't realized you're standing right behind it. Azrael's words pierced my mind like an electric shock. I took 2 steps back and raised my kerosene lamp high. The trembling flame illuminated the black oak door bound in iron. Over 12 years, I had stared at this door thousands of times, but never had I truly looked at it with open eyes. The heavy iron crossbars, the decorative rivets, the massive sliding deadbolts, every structural reinforcement was mounted on the corridor side, the side where I stood. If a vault is built to imprison a beast, the structural load-bearing mechanisms face inward to resist pressure from inside. But this door, its entire resistance design faced outward, bracing against the dark tunnel. No, that's impossible, I whispered, my voice trembling. Brother Malva. He services this door every week. Malva is a faithful craftsman. Azrael replied calmly, leaning against his dark stone wall. But he only sees what he is permitted to see. Call him down. Sorian, look closely at the metal he wipes down every night. I summoned Brother Malva Quill that very night. Malva was the vault engineer, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with forearms covered in old burn scars from a failed exorcism decades ago in Bergamo, where his sleeves caught fire without anyone else in the room being singed. Ever since, he sought reassignment under the earth, working with locks, hinges, and blessed oil, silent metal that never lied. Malva arrived carrying a bucket of blessed olive oil and rags. In the cold draft of the tunnel, he let out a dry laugh to break the oppression. Another squeaking hinge. Sorian, I told you, the humidity down here under the old Roman tombs could rust diamond. Malva, I cut him off, my tone so sharp he froze. Wipe the oil off the right side of the iron frame, right where it meets the bedrock. Malva frowned but knelt down. He rubbed the dry cloth vigorously against the metal. As the lamp light hit the exposed surface, Malva went stiff, every muscle on his weathered face contracted. The metal there wasn't the dark gray of forged iron, nor the orange-brown of ordinary rust. It was scorched black, pitted, and decaying, as if eaten away by acid or exposed to a flame devoid of heat. And most horrifyingly, the scorch marks originated from the corridor's bedrock, slowly creeping inward toward the oak door of Vault Cell 13. This isn't corrosion, Malva whispered, his shaking fingers hovering over the blackened iron. He recoiled as if touching dry ice. Sorian, holy water doesn't do this to metal. I re-blessed this frame 3 weeks ago. When you poured the holy water, what happened? I pressed him, stepping closer. Malva's voice cracked. The water, it hissed. It bubbled into gray foam and turned the color of stale tea on contact. I thought it was just old iron reacting with salt. It wasn't reacting to salt. Azrael's voice resonated from behind the window, deep and cold as collapsing stone. It was fighting back. That iron frame has shielded you for 300 years. But even the thickest shield eventually wears thin. Malva snapped his head up, staring wide-eyed at the barred window. He had served down here for 15 years. But this was the first time Azrael had ever spoken directly to him. What is eating away at it? Malva stammered. Azrael didn't answer the question directly. He simply stared toward the dead-end stretch of the corridor, where the faint yellow lamp light faded into an absolute, suffocating darkness leading beneath the ancient foundations. Your lamps will burn out an hour early tonight, Azrael said softly. Pack your tools and return to the guardroom. Do not look back toward the dead end. Malva hurriedly gathered his gear, but as he stood up, a quiet hiss echoed through the hall. The yellow flame inside my kerosene lamp instantly shriveled to the size of a pinhead. The light turned a sickly, bruised blue. Simultaneously, the temperature plunged. My breath, along with Malva's, billowed out in thick white clouds. From the dead-end wall, where ancient Roman stonework met bedrock, a sound echoed. Not footsteps. Not a draft of wind. It was an exhalation. A long, deep breath dragging across rough stone, bringing with it the stench of rotting mortar, stagnant ancient blood, and absolute silence. The lamp in my hand snuffed out completely. Pitch-black darkness slammed down, suffocating us both. The moment darkness consumes the last light underground, do not strike a match. That tiny spark won't help you see it, it will only show it right where you're standing. Total silence swallowed the corridor. Darkness 7 flights beneath Vatican City isn't just an absence of light, it is a dense liquid that presses against your eardrums, floods your nostrils, and constricts your throat. Sorian, Brother Malva's voice trembled right beside me. I could hear his teeth chattering uncontrollably as he fumbled frantically in his pockets for matches. Don't strike it, I barked in the dark, grabbing Malva's wrist. His skin felt like a corpse left 3 days in a morgue. There's something standing right behind me, Malva gasped, his breath smelling of sheer panic. Sorian, I feel it. It has no shape. but it's occupying the space behind my back. Back up, both of you. Press against the cell door. Azrael's voice commanded from inside the darkness. For the first time in 12 years, I heard a tremor of real strain in his tone. He wasn't performing. He was issuing a survival order. I dragged Malva backward until our backs slammed against the black oak door. In that exact moment, an absolute nightmare of a sound echoed right beside my waist. Clink, clink, clink. It was my cluster of 9 iron keys. A presence, not a physical hand, but a localized pocket of absolute cold, was sliding past my hip. Slowly inspecting each metallic tooth on the ring, it felt like an iceberg drifting inches from my skin, methodically counting the keys. Azrael, I gritted my teeth, shivering violently. It's taking the keys. It isn't taking them, Azrael whispered, his voice right behind the barred window inches from my neck. It's counting. It's counting how many keys on your ring have never been used. Don't move. Don't breathe heavily. Do not form its shape in your mind. If you visualize it, you give it a vessel to enter this reality. I shut my eyes tightly. I forced myself to picture sunny orange groves in Sicily. I pictured the fountains at St. Peter's Square. I anchored my mind to the brightest memories to resist the intrusion lurking inches away. Beside me, Malva began whispering frantic Hail Marys, his voice cracking into fragments. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Shut your mouth, Malva, I whispered through clenched teeth. But it was too late. From the dark air inches from our faces, a sound resonated. It wasn't a voice. It was an echo. It repeated Malva's prayer, but in a completely hollow, flat pitch devoid of rhythm, like wind whistling through a hollow skull. Now, and at the hour of our death. The sound didn't travel through our ears. It echoed directly inside our skulls. Malva clutched his head and collapsed to his knees. He opened his mouth to scream, but I lunged forward, clapping my hand over his mouth and pinning him against the icy floor. Shush whoosh. A crimson spark ignited inside Vault Cell 13. Azrael had scraped his claw across the stone wall, creating a dim red flame. That faint, bloody light trickled out through the barred window onto the hall floor. In that dim crimson glow, we looked toward the dead-end wall. There was no monster, no dark shadow. Instead, the space at the end of the corridor was bending. The air swirled like an invisible whirlpool. Azrael's red light bent as it hit that localized space, plunging straight into the floor and vanishing. It looked like a tear in reality, an absolute void patiently, methodically crawling millimeter by millimeter toward the oak door. It's pulling back, Azrael whispered from within. It was only testing the resistance of your lamps tonight. Shaking, I took Malva's matches and struck one. A yellow flame flared to life. The heavy, suffocating air instantly vanished. The oil lamps on the wall relit themselves. I looked down at Malva. The vault engineer lay curled on the stone floor, eyes wide and fixed on the ceiling, drenched in cold sweat. But what terrified me most was his left forearm, the skin scarred by the old exorcism fire. On that scarred tissue, veins bulged in the shape of ancient runes. They weren't filled with red blood, but frostbite lines of deep purple that had just burned into his flesh. It saw me. Sorian, Malva whispered, his pupils dilated. 15 years ago in Bergamo, I didn't perform an exorcism on that woman. 15 years ago, that thing marked me. It pushed me down into this vault, waiting for tonight. I looked up at Azrael through the barred window. The demon stood there, his face pale under the dying crimson flame. He stared at me with absolute, bitter clarity. Go find Cardinal Dust, Sorian, tell him. The second silence has begun knocking on the door. History isn't forgotten, it is deliberately burned. But if you hold an ancient page up to a flame at the right angle, you'll realize what the fire tried to erase is the only thing that can save your life. I hauled Brother Malva up from the icy floor. Though the lamps burned again, the flames flickered violently as if the room itself were hyperventilating. I dragged Malva to the underground infirmary before rushing to the highest level of the secret archives, a place a simple guard like me was never permitted to enter. Vatican City lay dead quiet beneath heavy night rain. Long corridors of polished white marble stretched out endlessly, a stark contrast to the oppressive filth 14 levels beneath. In the sealed repository untouched for 2 centuries, I found her. Sister Nyx Oral, a young archivist with sharp, tired eyes. She sat surrounded by crumbling manuscripts, their edges so brittle they dissolved into brown dust whenever she turned a page. Sorian Valez? Nyx raised her head, untroubled by my sudden intrusion. Wearing white linen gloves, she held a magnifying glass. Cardinal Dust told me you would come, though I didn't expect you this soon. Where is he? I panted, sweat and rain dripping off my forehead. Where is Cardinal Dust? With the prelates, Nyx answered softly, pointing toward ancient texts arranged in a circle around a beeswax candle. Trying to draft a political excuse for why the temperature beneath the Roman necropolis dropped to freezing in midsummer. But we both know the real reason, don't we? Nyx pointed to a parchment manuscript whose origin had been thoroughly erased, its margins torn. The author's name scraped away with a blade. What you and I were taught since childhood are sanitized fables, Nyx said, her eyes reflecting the yellow candle flame. In the year 590, when the plague ravaged Rome, Pope Gregory allegedly saw a vision of the Archangel Michael sheathing a sword atop the Emperor Hadrian's mausoleum, now Castel Sant'Angelo. They say the plague lifted, and the angel vanished. A comforting story. And the truth? I leaned closer, smelling vinegar and heavy iron gall ink from the parchment. Nyx tilted the parchment at a 45-degree angle toward the flame. Scraped away text began to emerge as faint indentations, grooves carved deep into the vellum over 1,000 years ago. A report written by a Benedictine monk. Nyx translated softly. It was no angry angel. It was a chipped shield. What withdrew that night was not disease, but a void so vast that the river Tiber ceased flowing for 3 days. It withdrew not out of fear of an angel, but because it realized, beneath the soil of Rome, another entity had stood in its path long enough to wear down its patience. I swallowed hard, cold sweat running down my back. The monk called the event of 590, the first silence. Nyx continued, looking up at me. It lasted 3 days. For 3 days, no infant cried, no hound barked, and every star in the Roman night sky stood completely motionless. And the monk left a marginal note at the bottom. She pointed her gloved finger to tiny Latin script. The round chamber beneath Castel Sant'Angelo was not built to hold a prisoner. It is the anchor terminal of an ancient conduit. The entity in Vault Cell 13 was not captured. He is the sole load-bearing pillar keeping the roof of this reality from collapsing. Azrael, I whispered, his name carrying a frightening new weight. What did he tell you tonight? Nyx asked quietly. He said. I shuddered, remembering Azrael's milky eyes behind the bars. He said he isn't what's trapped in there. He's the only thing hiding from what's in the hall. And whatever is in the hall is counting the keys on my belt. Nyx went still. She slowly folded the parchment. Her academic composure shattered, replaced by sheer terror that knowledge could not soothe. Cardinal Dust classified this manuscript as heretical hoax. Nyx whispered, clutching her chest. Yet he secretly reopened every sealed text from the Renaissance. Sorian. 300 years ago, when the Church constructed Vault Cell 13, they never defeated Azrael in some holy war. Then what happened? Azrael came to them. Nyx looked directly into my eyes. Each word landing like a sentence. He crawled out of the deep earth battered and broken. Knelt before the Vatican. And begged them. Build me a room of oak and iron. Anchor me with your prayers. For if I have no fixed point in your reality, the thing hunting behind me will swallow the light of your world whole. If you raise a candle and see no shadow behind you on the wall, do not turn around. Your shadow isn't gone. It was just swallowed by whatever is standing behind you. Sister Nyx's revelation hung thick in the air. Azrael, the demon the Church proudly claimed to imprison for 3 centuries, was merely a desperate refugee clinging to our reality. Before I could process it, a sudden sub-zero blast swept through the archives, snuffing out the candle. Total darkness swallowed the library. But this wasn't ordinary night darkness. A thin, Icy mist smelling of decayed lime and salt began crawling across the ancient wooden floorboards. Sorian. Sister Nyx's voice trembled in the dark. I heard her step back, bumping into manuscripts that fell clatter, clatter, to the floor. I can't see my shadow. I pulled out a backup flashlight, a rare piece of electronics I brought upstairs. When the beam cut through the dark, the sight froze my blood. The light hit the wall behind Nyx, but on the stone surface, there was no shadow. Her body stood there, but her shadow was being pinned to the floor by a shapeless, dark pool beneath her feet. The pool behaved like liquid blackness. Slowly, drinking, the light emitted from my flashlight. Clink, clink. The ring of 9 iron keys on my hip vibrated again. The 7th key, the one never used in 12 years, grew searingly hot, scorching through my trousers against my hip. Run, I yelled, grabbing Nyx's wrist and yanking her away from the dark patch on the floor. We bolted from the library, sprinting down steep stone stairs leading back into the earth. I knew the only safe place left, as insane as it sounded, was Vault Cell 13. The room housing the demon bearing the brunt of the world's nightmare. When Nyx and I reached the 14th level, the corridor had transformed into a frozen hell. Every oil lamp had been snuffed out. The iron bands binding the black oak door were no longer scorched black, they were smoking white. A thick layer of black frost coated the metal, emitting a pungent stench of sulfur and freezer-burnt flesh. Brother Malva was on his knees before the door, gripping the frame. The frostbite runes on his arms oozed a gray liquid. He was no longer praying, his voice was reduced to hollow groans. It's here. It isn't knocking anymore. It's breathing through the cracks. Malva, get up. I tried to haul him up, but his body felt heavy as granite. Through the barred window of cell 13, I saw Azrael. He wasn't on his stone bench. He was kneeling in the center of the cell, fingers dug deep into the stone floor, his back straining violently. Around his body, a brilliant crimson flame flared, desperately pushing back the black mist seeping through the door's seams. His face contorted in agony. Sweat mixed with blood dripped down his chin. Sorian, Azrael roared, his voice shaking the stone corridor and dislodging debris. In 30 seconds, the outer iron brace will collapse. What do you need me to do? I screamed, drawing the key ring. The 7th key burned red hot in my palm. Take the 7th key. Insert it into the bottom frame lock. Azrael glared through the window, eyes filled with blood. Widen the anchor point of this cell. Let me draw power from the consecrated ground above. Stop. An authoritative yet panicked voice boomed from the staircase. Cardinal Severn Dust appeared. His red vestments were torn, his clouded eye wide with horror. He clutched an ancient black leather ritual book. Sorian, if you turn that key, Cardinal Dust panted, voice shaking, you shatter part of the Vatican's wards. Every sanctuary above will lose its protection. You are gambling the entire city on a demon. I looked at Cardinal Dust, then at Malva writhing on the floor, and at Sister Nyx trembling as her shadow failed to return. Finally, I looked into Azrael's eyes. The demon imprisoned for 300 years offered no pleas, only a brutal truth. You had 12 years to know who I am. Sorian, choose now. Die with a lying cardinal, or live with an honest demon. The cruelest truth isn't discovering you served a lie. It's realizing that lie was the only thing keeping you from going insane. A suffocating pause hung over the corridor. The 7th key burned like red-hot iron in my grip, searing agony into my palm. The smell of scorched flesh filled the air. Sorian, pull your hand back, Cardinal Severn Dust shouted, taking another step down the stone stairs. Veins bulged across his clouded eye. You don't understand what you're doing. That key was never meant for a guard. Then who was it meant for? I spun around, roaring at the prelate. You hid the truth from me for 12 years. You made me believe I was a proud soldier guarding the world's worst evil. But you were just using me as a silent sacrifice. Cardinal Dust froze. His aged, deeply creased face collapsed. For the first time in 12 years, his absolute authority vanished, leaving only a terrified, exhausted old man. Yes, Cardinal Dust whispered, his voice shattering like glass. "We are not jailers. We never won this war. Every warden chosen for this post was merely a living candle. Your discipline and naive faith were the only energy keeping Azrael's mind from being swallowed by what lies outside." I let out a bitter, wild laugh that echoed off the damp stone walls. 12 years of service, 12 years buried 14 flights beneath the earth, 12 years turning my back on the grief of my father's death. All because I was naive enough to serve as a living candle. Enough. I gritted my teeth, raising the red-hot 7th key. I'm done being a silent candle. Sorian, listen to me. Cardinal Dust lunged forward, reaching out. If you expand the anchor point, Azrael regains a fraction of his true power. But the price is thinning the spiritual boundary across Rome. The churches above will no longer be safe havens. They haven't been safe for a long time. Sister Nyx called out from behind. She stepped forward, holding out the scraped parchment manuscript. You knew about the second silence 20 years ago. You knew the outer iron frame was decaying, but you hid it in forbidden archives. Cardinal Dust stared at the manuscript, then down at Malva writhing as frostbite runes oozed gray fluid from his arms. I only wanted to protect the peace of those above. The Cardinal whispered, his knees trembling before giving out onto the cold stone floor. If humanity learned that heaven has no legion of angels guarding them, but only a dying demon under the Vatican holding the line, the world would collapse before the dark even arrived. Crack, crack. A brittle, horrific sound echoed from the black oak door. The central iron crossbar, forged in the 17th century, snapped clean in half. Splinters of oak exploded outward. Black mist surged through the fracture. It possessed no form, but brought with it the deafening screams of 10,000 swallowed souls. The final oil lamp shattered into dust. Inside cell 13, Azrael collapsed to his knees, vomiting black blood. He looked up through the cracked window, whispering with his last breath, "Sorian, I can't hold this wall anymore." I didn't look at Cardinal Dust. I didn't look at the scriptures on the wall. I stepped up to the door and jammed the burning 7th key into the recessed keyhole near the floor. "Hold on, demon," I snarled, turning the key full force counterclockwise. A heavy clack echoed like the breaking of a giant spine. The entire vault exploded in brilliant crimson light. Never turn your back when a 300-year-old lock snaps open on its own. Because what steps out might not be the demon you tried to save, but the entire abyss pouring through the gap. Boom. Turning the key didn't make a simple metallic sound. It unleashed an explosion that felt like the Earth's crust fracturing. Vault Cell 13 shook violently as if hit by a magnitude 10 earthquake. Multi-ton stone blocks cracked and rained debris into the hall. From the bottom keyhole, a river of crimson light burst forth, spreading across the floor like spiritual lava. "Sorian, get back," Sister Nyx screamed, her voice swallowed by absolute chaos. Wherever the crimson light touched, the icy black mist in the corridor hissed and evaporated into smoke. The invisible void outside let out a long shriek, not an audible sound, but a psychic shockwave that slammed directly into our minds. Cardinal Dust clutched his head, collapsing as blood leaked from his ears and nose. Brother Malva convulsed wildly, eyes rolled back. Simultaneously, the remaining iron deadbolts on the black oak door disengaged automatically. Clack, 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 clack. Heavy iron bars slid back from the frame. The oak door, sealed shut for 300 years, slowly swung open 2 handspans wide. Immense pressure blew out from inside the cell, knocking me flat onto my back. In the crimson light swirling with black mist, a figure stepped out from the darkness of Vault Cell 13. It was Azrael. He was no longer the man in plain dark clothes I stared at through the bars. He towered like a pillar of judgment, his body fractured with lines glowing red like molten magma, and behind his back hung not wings of an angel or demon, but a shattered mantle of light pulsing to repel the dark. He took one step into the corridor. His footfall cracked the stone floor into 100 pieces. 300 years. Azrael's voice echoed like grinding iron plates, vibrating in my chest. I forgot the feeling of standing on this side of the door. Azrael. I struggled to sit up. My palm blackened from the key. Strike it down. The demon turned to look at me. In his glowing red eyes, I saw an ancient, eternal exhaustion. The fatigue of a soldier left on the front lines for millennia without relief. It cannot be struck down. Sorian, Azrael whispered, his voice softening slightly. It is the silence. You cannot slay an absence with swords or spells. You can only use yourself to plug the gap. Around us, the corridor's space began to dissolve. Ancient Roman stone walls crumbled, revealing the pitch-black void of deep space behind them. The void in the hallway, seeing Azrael step out, coalesced into a massive storm of darkness, swirling with millions of invisible gnashing maws. It surged directly at Azrael. The demon threw his arms wide. The crimson flame around his body flared into a massive wall of fire, taking the full brunt of the void's impact. Flash. The entire 14th level vanished in a blinding glare of light. I felt my body thrown through space, falling freely into a zero-gravity void where past, present, and future dissolved into glittering shards. When eternal darkness swallows the final candle, do not look for angels. Pray that the demon standing before you doesn't bleed out its very last drop of blood. I tumbled through a weightless void surrounded by flickering fragments of time. I saw Rome in 590. Dead bodies piled high from plague while an absolute quiet swallowed the sky. I saw 17th century masons trembling as they carved Latin prayers onto the oak door, looking fearfully over their shoulders. And I saw my younger self, 26 and naive, swearing an oath under the Swiss Guard flag, unaware of the eternal sentence waiting beneath the earth. Impact. A violent shock slammed me back into reality. I hit the cold stone floor, coughing up blood. Half the vaulted ceiling had collapsed. Pale moonlight filtered through cracks in the Roman necropolis above, casting a cold silver beam onto the corridor. But that silver light was being torn apart by the battle unfolding before me. Azrael stood in the heart of the void storm. His body, pale for 12 years, now burned like a dying star. He caught two swirling tendrils of raw dark void with his bare hands. Every time the darkness touched his skin, a portion of Azrael's body combusted into red embers. Sorian, Azrael's roar shook the bedrock. Look beneath your feet. I looked down, stunned. On the cracked stone floor, the crimson blood spilling from Azrael's wounds wasn't pooling uselessly. It was flowing along the stone fissures, connecting into a massive ancient seal around Vault Cell 13. He hadn't stepped out to escape. He stepped out to turn the entire corridor into a new, larger cell. He's making himself a living anchor. Sister Nyx screamed from a corner, shielding the unconscious brother Malva. Sorian, he needs someone to lock the seal from the outside. Lock it? I looked at the key ring in my hands. The 9th key, the largest, oldest one shaped like a broken angel skull, was glowing with a cold, pale blue light. Sorian Valez. Azrael turned his head. Half his face was stripped away by darkness down to black bone. But his remaining eye retained the calm, polite dignity he carried for centuries. For 12 years, you served well as a warden. Azrael whispered over the roaring void. Tonight, finish your duties. You'll die, I yelled, tears and blood running down my face. If I turn this seal, you'll be trapped forever in the space between realities. You'll never see the orange trees or the fountains again. Azrael offered a smile. The only smile in 12 years devoid of hidden meaning or misdirection. I never needed to see them. Sorian, he said softly, like wind through summer leaves. I only needed to know that in your world, those beautiful things still exist. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself up on trembling legs. I sprinted to the central stone pedestal, where the primary keyhole of the seal was carved deep into the bedrock. I jammed the 9th key into the slot. The storm of darkness sensed its doom. It let out an ear-splitting screech, abandoned Azrael, and lunged directly at me like a cornered beast. Don't you touch my warden. Azrael roared. He lunged forward, spreading his arms wide, wrapping his burning body around the dark storm. Using himself as a container, He drove the void down into the floor of Vault Cell 13. Using every ounce of strength left, I turned the 9th key one full circle. Clack. A shockwave of turquoise light swept across the entire floor. Space froze for a fraction of a millisecond before the black oak door slammed shut with absolute finality. Bang. The dark vanished. The storm ceased. The thudding sub-zero cold retreated like a flash flood. Absolute silence returned to the hall. Only silver moonlight filtered through the rubble, illuminating 3 battered survivors catching their breath. If you ever pass locked doors beneath ancient stone, don't listen for rusting bolts. Listen to the whispers within, to hear if the guard is still human, or has become the very thing it fights. Dust and absolute silence settled over the ruined corridor. Pale moonlight shone through the ceiling cracks onto the black oak door. The door bore no trace of corrosion. Its iron bands glowed with the deep gray of metal forged in spiritual fire. Solid as an unassailable fortress. I knelt on the stone floor, my burned hands clutching the key ring. The 9th key had vanished entirely, replaced by a dark key-shaped scar burned permanently into my right palm. Cardinal Severn Dust leaned heavily on his staff, standing up from the corner. His clouded eyes stared at the door, then at me with a mix of reverence and profound sorrow. "Is it over?" Sister Nix whispered, holding Brother Malva, who was regaining consciousness with clear eyes, the frostbite runes completely gone from his arms. "It is never over," Cardinal Dust said hoarsely. "It was merely renewed by the life of a demon and the soul of a soldier." In the weeks following that night, no newspaper carried stories about the battle beneath Vatican City. The church announced minor restoration work on the Roman necropolis to explain structural cracks. Cardinal Dust officially retired from active duty due to failing health. But before stepping down, he handed his secret library keys to Sister Nix. Nix accepted them. She returned to her ancient manuscripts, not to study past history, but to write new protocols for future wardens. Brother Malva continued his maintenance work, but from that night onward, whenever he oiled hinges or inspected iron bands, he always polished the surfaces facing outward into the corridor first. He also lit a second oil lamp right at the vault entrance, a light he called the lamp for the one who waits. When I asked him what it was for, Malva offered a quiet, honest smile. "So if whatever is outside ever returns, it knows that down here, no one has abandoned their post." As for me, I stayed with Vault Cell 13. I no longer wear the colorful Swiss Guard uniform. I wear a plain gray habit, carrying the same kerosene lamp I held for 12 years. Every night, my footsteps echo down the stone steps leading to the 14th level. I no longer walk the rounds with the naive faith of a man believing comforting lies. I walk with the sharp clarity of a soldier who knows the exact price of peace on the surface. I stop before the black oak door and raise my lamp to the small barred window. Inside the cell, Azrael sits on his stone bench. His body still bears glowing red magma like scars. His face aged centuries from the battle. He no longer asks to be let out. We no longer play our old game of prisoner and jailer. "How is it up there tonight, Sorian?" Azrael's voice comes through the window, deep and calm. "Summer has arrived," I answer, leaning my back against the iron-bound frame, watching the flame dance on the stone. The orange trees in the garden are bearing fruit. Clear skies tonight. You can see every constellation over Rome. Azrael goes quiet for a moment. Through the bars, I hear a faint sigh of relief. "Is it still out there?" he asks softly. "Yes," I reply, my thumb absently tracing the key-shaped scar in my palm. The corridor is still 1 degree colder than it should be. Sometimes, I still hear it testing the hinges, slow and patient. "Are you afraid, Warden?" I look toward the dark dead-end corridor, where the ancient void still lurks, waiting as it has for 300 years. Then I turn back to the glowing red eyes of the demon behind the bars. "I'm not afraid," I answer, speaking the simplest, truest words of my life. Because I know, as long as we both stand on our respective sides of this door, the dark will never cross. Azrael smiles. He closes his eyes, drifting into the fitful sleep of an eternal guardian. I raise my kerosene lamp and begin another lap around the corridor. Tonight, the locks hold fast. Tonight, the world above can sleep in peace.